This is Mike Jordan with Unique Wealth Education, and we have an incredible guest on the show today. It's a gentleman who, to me, is one of the premier real estate investors in the entire country, and we're going to speak to him. He's going to tell us about his story, how he got started, and some of the incredible things that he's done since he got started in real estate in 2000. Our guest is Aaron Adams from Indianapolis. Aaron, thank you very much for joining us on the show today.
You're welcome. It's a pleasure to be here.
Well, thank you very much. So, hey, we're going to get right into it, and we'll, I'll get into some of the meat and potatoes of this conversation, because our goal is always to educate the audience on, real estate, how to get started, if they are started in real estate, how to become better. And, I want you to tell us a little bit about your business and some of the things that you've done over the years, because as I understand, you've done over 5,000 flips, which is just outrageous. It's incredible. Myself, I've done a couple thousand, and it's like, I just can't imagine almost doing triple that. So that's incredible. So tell us a little bit about your business.
So, the current model of our business is we're in 5 markets right now. We're buying about 50 single-family homes a month. I own the construction companies that fix them up, the real estate brokerages in those 5 markets that we used to acquire and to sell them, and then we have a property management company. We're in Charlotte, North Carolina, Indianapolis, Indiana, which is our biggest operation, Dallas, Texas, Kansas City, Missouri, and then southeastern Idaho. In addition to single-family homes, we're really focused on mobile home parks right now. Have just set up 2 mobile home dealerships to buy direct from the manufacturer to fill the parks that we own. Currently, I have 5 parks, and actually this morning I'm working on a $10 million pickup totaling over 700 spaces. Wow. So, we dabble in several different aspects of real estate, but more focused on what's the opportunity and what's good deals right now. So I've been doing this for 20 years, and we really just kind of follow the opportunity.
Yeah, that's incredible. So I understand you manage around 3,000 doors, and that in itself is incredible. And you own 250 plus doors, and that, so tell us a little bit about that, about your property management, the doors that you own, and then I'd like to hear about that.
So when I got started, I was living in Southern California, and I was teaching high school, and that was back in 2000. And in the first few years that I started doing flips, my rule was I used cap rate. And for those of you that aren't familiar with that, just, my cash on cash return, unleveraged. And so I wouldn't buy a property to flip unless it was at least a 7 cap, because I figured that I could always go get a mortgage and keep it as a rental if I couldn't sell it. So I tried to raise that floor to minimize the fallout, because I just watched people, stack up a bunch of deals, have hard money on them, and then that in and of itself forced them into bankruptcy. And so one of the ways that I knew to leave California was when I couldn't get above even a 5 cap anymore. And that happened to be in 2005.
Right.
In 2005, I made the jump to the Midwest, where it was still, and it still is, very easy to get a double-digit cap rate on property. And so we started buying heavily in January 2005, the forward in Indianapolis. A couple of years later, we moved into Dallas. A couple of years after that, we moved into Kansas City. We went back into Vegas for a while. We went down into Florida. We went back into California. And, it really just highlights this idea that if you think about real estate as a national opportunity, and you don't get as married to doing business close to where you are, you buy a lot of plane tickets. I mean, I gave Delta Airlines $75,000 last year and got on one of their planes 160 times.
Oh, goodness. Wow. That's quite a bit of traveling.
You're right. But the net effect is it's really kind of insulated me from, I've been able to capitalize on the upswings and then really capitalize on the downturns. And whether I was selling properties to homeowners during the first upswing, and then I switched to selling properties to Wall Street funds and international investors when the market crashed. And I don't care what the market does, and I don't care about going into a market, because once you've mastered kind of that core competency of how to work outside your own hometown, then real estate really becomes easy, and just what's the opportunity and how do I capitalize?
That is so interesting that you bring that up because, a couple of the questions that I had coming up for you is, number one, how did you make it through the downturn? Because you started in 2000 and you made it out like a champion. And it probably, professionals such as yourself understand how to predict and, take a look at the market and capitalize on the market wherever it's at. And so how did that affect you, that downturn that we had in 2006, 7, and 8, and how did that affect you?
So it's funny because we had this model that we were using to sell properties, to flip properties, where we'd identify a client that had pretty good credit and pretty good income, and there was a subprime mortgage product in 2006, 7, and 8 that allowed you to buy. So you could buy a property with hard money. 100% financing. Okay. And then once it was rehabbed and rented, you could refi for 125% of the appraised value. Now, obviously, those kind of loan products or liar loans don't exist anymore. But for years, we were showing investors how they could buy 100% financing with hard money and then refi and get all of their money back, plus extra money to use for other deals. And when the market tanked in 2008, we were like, Dodd-Frank came out and it banned basically all subprime mortgage. And we really had to evaluate what we were going to do. And it's funny because I watch other investors just lose their mind and they keep trying to do the same model in a market that doesn't work anymore.
Right.
And so, we looked at the landscape and we said, obviously people are interested in buying, and we identified international investors and we identified a couple of high net worth groups, private equity groups that were interested in buying property, and that became our new customer. We also realized that there were a lot of Americans who were sitting in tons of cash in their IRA that they could self-direct and buy property using their IRA, and that became a whole pool of clientele we had never considered before. And so it took the courage of going from 100% financed clients to zero financing clients. But you really have to hold something up and look at it from every angle to really identify opportunity. And you can't be married to, this is the kind of business that I do, when the market changes. You have to just be humble and say, how can I learn this? What can I add to my knowledge base, whether it's a different clientele, a different buyer, that's going to allow me to get high liquidity again.
Absolutely. So, from what I'm hearing here is you really can make it in any market. You're just going to you're going to change with the times. You're not going to let the times change you. And that's, to me, something that a lot of real estate investors make mistakes on, is that they stick to what they were doing, in the past, or what they think is right. And they really got to adjust to the market conditions, what the market is allowing for. So,
Totally.
It looks like, you've capitalized on the market in every segment, every phase of that market, and done incredible.
Yeah, I would say, when the market crashed the last time, unemployment shot to 12%, right?
Sure.
15%. And people were losing their mind about that because obviously you couldn't put a hot property on MLS and flip it to a homeowner.
Sure.
But I always said, if there's 10% unemployment, then there's 90% employment, and there's still
Right.
market activity taking place. There's still people buying at the auction. So how do I tap into that river and pull water out of that? It doesn't have to be the pond I was fishing in. Let me just capitalize on that opportunity.
Yeah. You're thinking outside the box all the time, and you are really becoming, the person who is a trendsetter as far as what works in that market, because you're taking advantage of the situation at the time. And so why did you end up in the Midwest? I mean, when you're in California, sometimes people end up going to Texas, sometimes,
right.
Which you are in Texas. I mean, you're one of the few real estate investors in the country that deals in Charlotte, Idaho, Kansas City, Indianapolis, Dallas. That's incredible. I run an operation just in Michigan, in Southeast Michigan, in Detroit. And that alone is to run an operation is a big undertaking. And I look at it like you're running an operation in 5 different markets, So that's incredible in itself. But why did you start in the Midwest, in Indianapolis?
Well, if you look at, I was reading this economic report years ago that talked about real estate markets tend to be linear and nonlinear. So, like, you look at Southern California, and you can see if you look back at the past 50 years, you see periods of 100% appreciation over 7 years, and then half the market value collapses. So it's like a nonlinear track of appreciation as you look at the history of that property.
Right.
And most of the Midwest tends to be what's called very linear. So, like, my family, my immediate family on my dad's side is from Indianapolis, and my grandparents bought a house like in 1948. And if you look at the price, they paid like $6,000 for it, or it was less. It was like $3,200. If you look at the price points charted for the last 60 years, it never doubled in a couple of years, but it never bottomed out.
Right.
And markets in Indiana, markets in Michigan, markets in Ohio, as long as you don't lose your population base, like in the case of a Detroit that just devastates a local economy, as long as that doesn't happen, they tend to just be very predictable, 3-5% appreciation over the years. And so realizing that California, in my opinion, was about to crash, and I was early, I left the party way early when I couldn't get over a 5 cap. That's when I said, well, where can I go set up shop and really value invest? And that's what drew me to the Midwest. I mean, I loved California. I went to grad school there, and it's a sexy place to live. And people thought I was nuts moving to a flyover state. But I've always kind of want to be where other people aren't. So, I bought my first mobile home park in 2003, and people, are thinking trailers and junkyard dogs and slumlording, and now it's like every Wall Street fund is trying to get into the space. And
Yes.
so if I can kind of do what's not sexy, that's been a good 20-year strategy for me.
Well, that's incredible. That's really thinking outside the box and not going with the status quo. One thing after, having this bit of conversation with you that a lot of the listeners and myself want to know is, how did you get started? What was your first deal? Tell us about that, because, to get to the point where you're at doesn't happen overnight. Obviously, it's a long road to get there, and I don't want anyone ever to think that it's something that could happen in 6 months or a year. This is a long road. But how did you get started? What was your first deal? And can you give us a little bit of information on that?
I tell investors that making that first $100,000 in a new environment, whether it's you've always had a job and you got to start your own business, or you've owned a business and you want to make $100,000 in real estate, that's always kind of the hardest dollars to make. And I was teaching high school in 2000. I loved teaching. I loved the kids. I was going to grad school at night, and I coached volleyball and basketball and soccer. And I saw an infomercial. It was the old Carlton Sheets No Money Down program that was popular in the 80s and 90s. And it was his, I just found it on YouTube the other day. It was the 1998 with his CDs and his books, and it was like $4,000. There was no way at 3 a.m, as I watched every minute of the 90 minutes, that I was going to spend that money on that course. So I found his 1989 version with the cassette tapes on eBay for like $100.
Oh my!
So I bought that and realized that you get what you pay for with your education, because it was completely worthless as I kind of went through it. So I went to Barnes & Noble. I bought every single book that I could find on real estate investing. The first book that I read was Rich Dad Poor Dad, Robert Kiyosaki. And that book was only a couple years old at the time. Now it's like, published in 80 languages. But at the time, it was a relatively new book. Read that and just lost sleep over it. So I went to a 3-day boot camp with Bruce Norris in Riverside that I paid, I think it was $3,000 or $4,000. And he's still in business today. He's a great investor, really cool guy. And out of that seminar, then I went out and put an offer on a duplex and bought it, and convinced my wife to sell our little suburban home and move into one side of the duplex and get out of the rat race. And we sold that 6 months later and made $50,000.
Wow.
And to high school teacher Aaron Adams to walk out of escrow with a check for $50,000. I mean, my salary was $40,000 a year teaching.
And you actually had someone that borrowed you the money to do your first deal and believed in you.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I 100% financed that deal. I borrowed the down payment money. I borrowed the rehab money.
Wow.
It was funny. One of the other teachers at the high school ended up staking me. He wrote me a personal check for $250,000. And I used that to buy deals 2 through 9. And made like $600,000 over the next 3 years with that money.
So is your teacher buddy still investing with you nowadays?
Well, it's kind of a sad story, because I was paying him 1% simple interest a month on that money, so $2,500 a month. And he called in the note a few years later because he wanted to loan it to his daughter. And guess who lost the money? It was his daughter.
Oh my goodness. How did she lose the money?
She wanted to start her own business, and we all have a blind spot. It's funny. I've had some of the worst fraud that I've had against me in my companies has been the people that were the closest to me. It's investors, beware of your own family, beware of the employees that you love the most, because they will be the ones that you have a blind spot. You don't set up good controls.
I think business is business, and you really have to have those standards, those policies and procedures, and you got to create those rules, which are your core values, and you can't bend for anyone, because at the end of the day, it's going to eventually affect your own business, the people that are in your business, your family, and actually affect them too. So I think that rules are very important in doing things the right way, and following the guidelines that you create is so important.
Real quick, Mike, you could actually make the case, to continuing on that line of thinking that you're talking about, is there's, I think maybe it's Tony Robbins in his money book. He talks about the fact that money is a printing press, right? Or money is printed on a printing press. And each one of us as investors can learn how to assemble that printing press. Sure. It's not art, it's science. And there's a science to the nuts and the bolts and the way that the printing press comes together. Once you've laid claim to that, and once you've spent the time required to build your own printing press, It does not matter the business you're in. It doesn't matter what state you're working in. It doesn't matter how many employees or how few you have. You can always go back to that well.
I agree. And that's a great statement. And, listeners, if you heard that, I think that's something that you should, soak in, and, take it from someone who's incredibly successful, like Aaron, who's telling you that he follows that rule and he loves that statement. So Aaron, what do you think about coaching? Do you suggest that newer investors or existing investors, do you believe in them having a coach, a mentor? What is your take on that?
Yeah, it's funny. In October, I got foot surgery, and I was up to like 275 pounds. I'm a big guy. I'm 6'4", but even that's when my waist is. I start having to break out the 42 pants, right? So I feel hideous at that weight. So I got foot surgery. I had a bone spread to remove, and I said to my wife, I just need to set a really hard goal, something I've never done, to push myself out of my comfort zone. I need to lose this weight. I'm 45. I don't want to go down that. It's like people decide in their 40s this path of health that they're just gonna fall off a cliff into their 50s and look disgusting, or like really suck it up and get in shape. And so I said, I'm going to run a marathon. And she's like, you've never even run a half marathon. I'm like, I've never even ran 9 miles. Right. I have two buddies who are real estate guys that I've mentored and that I've coached and that I've helped. One, his name is Mike from Indianapolis. Mike is an ultra marathoner. He's like the fastest 50 miler in the East Coast. Another buddy of mine, his name is Fred, colonel in the special forces, Afghanistan for 10 years. He did 300-mile races last year. And I went to them and I said, guys, I want to run a marathon in June. I'm signing up for the June 1st Teton Marathon. I'm fat. I'm out of shape. And how do I got to rehab this foot. Help me set up a plan. Help me give the framework. And, they've been coaching me on, I bought these little gel packets for my 8 or 9 mile run last week that you take every 45 minutes, and the shoes and the inserts and what kind of socks and what kind of watch I need. And it's just, if I'm being honest, it hasn't been hard. I'm down 20 pounds. I got up today at 6 o'clock. I did a 5 mile run. It was easy. Because when you plug into people that you can trust, that can guide you, you always will pay your tuition for your education.
Yes.
The most expensive tuition is figuring it out yourself.
I agree, because you're going to avoid a lot of pitfalls, and those guys that you're talking about that are helping you with, with your training, they're going to tell you some things that are going to help you get from, point A to point B faster. And I always look at it like, I think that you're in everything you do, you're going to be successful. So you would get there with or without them. I truly believe that with your personality, but I believe that they help you get there faster. That's how I look
Absolutely.
at it. Just the last couple questions, because I know you got a lot going on today, and I just wanted to, bring up a couple things that I seen here. I think that, I always ask people that are on the podcast, what makes you unique in your field of business, in real estate? And, I want to tell you what I think makes you unique. And then, maybe you think otherwise or whatnot. But, I think it's your diversity. I mean, I think that you have many states going on. You're in single family homes. You own commercial buildings that we didn't even mention. I had this in my
Yeah.
notes. You own mobile home parks. You hold a ton of properties. You educate people on a regular basis. I know you have some education events coming up. So to me, I look at Aaron Adams as his uniqueness is his diversity. And,
Yeah.
people can learn so much from that. But I also don't want people to think that we could all be Aaron Adams overnight. Because Aaron Adams started with a duplex and he learned, and I guarantee you, because I didn't ask you this, you were a sponge. You get things
Yeah.
quick. You're very hungry. You're on your toes. So right now, what makes you unique is your diversity. But you can't get started with diversity. I think you got to get started with focusing. And I always say
Yeah.
focus means, follow on course until successful. So
Yeah.
diversity is what defines Aaron Adams to me as being so unique. What about you,
Yeah.
Aaron? What do you think about your uniqueness?
I agree with that. And people, it's interesting. When I was doing my master's degree in business, everyone was married to how they were going to use that degree. And that's why sometimes I joke that I hate, like, sorry, that's my dogs.
No problem.
I hate 5-year plans. I feel like a 5-year plan, I mean, it's nice to think about after you've had a couple of drinks, but it's not something you do at the first thing in the morning.
Sure.
Right? It's how do I learn something and monetize it? Like, people who are doing real estate education, don't take another class until you've made money from the one you just took. You don't know what you're not going to like. You don't know what you're not going to be good at. It wasn't until I built 10 homes that I'm like, I'm never going to develop and be a builder again. It sucks, right? We're building a commercial building now, and I'm like, yeah, I could do this. There's a pretty good spread on building commercial. And
Right.
and so that's one of the cool things about real estate. But if you try to be a master of everything at once, you become a master of nothing.
Absolutely.
You gotta make $100,000 at it before you decide if you want to keep it as part of your repertoire.
To jump in, I'll tell you, I always say build, diversify, and then protect. Because when you're in that building stage, it may be wholesaling, it might be fix and flipping, it might be buying and holding, whatever it may be. But specialize in something. Be great at something, and then you could take other things on. Because a lot of times we listen to the great investors such as yourself, and we say, hey, let's go out there and buy mobile home parks. No, you don't know about it. Learn about it first. Maybe go to one of your sessions and discuss it with you, or get trained by someone who's an expert in mobile home parks like you or someone else or whatever it may be. But your diversity is so unique, and I think that even you letting people know that you just focus on one area and really understand it, and then go on to the next. And I think that's kind of what you've done from what I've understood from you.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Well, one thing I want to ask you, I'd love to have you back on the show in about 6 months to a year, because
That'd be great, man.
I think listeners, get so much off of someone who's a gentleman, incredibly successful and willing to give back, because you're appreciative of how you got started. I know you, and I know that's how you are. You're a gentleman, and you're a giver. And I believe that, you give, you get so much back. And that's how I see you being, Aaron. You're just that kind of guy that would help people get to where they want to be and give them the right advice. And, a couple things that I want to mention. I know that you told me you have a couple events coming up in Indianapolis. Yeah. And one's on June 7th through the 9th, and the other one is on July 12th through the 14th. So what exactly is happening at those events, so the listeners could learn a little bit more? And, I would suggest them to go out there and learn from one of the best. So what's happening at those events?
So I figure your listeners are going to be in kind of one of two categories. Just starting out, don't have a lot of extra cash, need to focus on their active income and how to make more money. Okay. And then I find that there's people who they have some money, that, maybe a net worth of 300 to a million bucks plus. They're looking to maybe do some passive investing, maybe a little bit of active investing if it makes sense. So what we've kind of done and I know that your beginning investors, they're the ones that have the least amount of money, the least amount of time. They have a full life, and they're just trying to change. Maybe they're trying to fire their boss or change their game plan, right?
Sure.
So I would love to. I'll send you a link to just share with your listeners. If you're broke or just getting in the game and you don't have a lot, I have some webinars that I'll share where I teach all of my best active income techniques, how I do my flips, how I find properties, how we do direct marketing. I'll share those with you. They're on our IRA rental website. I'll send you, Mike, a login that you can share with your listeners as a value add to this podcast. And that's kind of your beginning group. If you have a net worth of a couple $100,000 or more, whether the money's in your retirement account, in a business line of credit, then we encourage those group investors to come to our live event. We do about 9 live events in Indianapolis every year. My Indianapolis operation is a $50 million a year operation. The second floor of our commercial building is a training room. And so there's no cost for that. We just require that they have potentially some money they could passively invest, because at the event we offer passive opportunities, properties that investors can buy, and deals that they can do with us. And so we kind of just, have them kind of figure out where they're at, because if you're getting in the game, then let me share you those free webinars so you can make some money. If you have a little money, then come to one of my events, and we'd love to have you come. We have one in June, we have one in July, and then we have a couple in the fall, in September, October, and November. So we have 5 more events that we're hosting this year, and there's no cost for that. We actually pay for your hotel room. The meals are included. We cap it to 50 investors a month. So you need to get on the phone with us and have us confirm you to that event. But if they're in your tribe, Mike, and if they're in your universe, then they're serious investors, and we're happy to pick up the tab on that.
Well, to me, that's incredible, because first of all, someone gets to go to an educational event and learn from you and some other folks that you're going to have there, and they can potentially pick up so much knowledge, which is priceless. And I know the events are, again, I'm going to mention the dates are June 7th through the 9th and July 12th through the 14th in Indianapolis. And you can go on Aaron's website at irarental.com. Again, that's irarental.com. You can fill out a form there, and Aaron's team will get back to you on setting up a time to have a conversation. You could also go to his Facebook company page, which is Alpine Capital Solutions, and that's you can do the same thing there, and they will respond to you. He has a great team, great systems in place, so their communication is incredible. And Aaron, I just want to tell you, I'm very appreciative. The listeners have gotten a lot from you. And to me, one thing you also help is to give a lot of people the motivation that really you can build up from not having any money to having being very successful in real estate. Now, I don't want to tell people 5,000 homes and $50 million operation, but some may, and we hope you do. Aaron hopes you do. I'm sure he does. But he can help you build passive income, become an active real estate investor also. So I think it's important to check out his websites, check out his Facebook. And Aaron, we will definitely be seeing you soon back on the Unique Wealth Education podcast. I mean, this has been incredible, and I really appreciate your time.
Yeah, Mike, I'd love to. And maybe next time we just cover one topic. Maybe let's just talk about Airbnb, which is a really hot topic, or just talk about mobile home, or whatever you like.
I would love to, because that's something that I didn't even mention, that Aaron also has Airbnbs. He's an expert at it, and he manages Airbnbs. So a lot of people would want to hear about that. And Aaron, I said, hey, in the next 6 months or a year, our listeners would love to hear many sessions with Aaron Adams. And if we can cover next time, maybe like we said, mobile homes, Airbnb. I know Airbnb is hot now, so that's maybe one that we could cover too. So we'll check your schedule out. We know how much you got going on, so we'll try to get you on the show as much as possible. And all these listeners are going to get so much information from you, and we definitely recommend that they go to your events too.
Appreciate you, brother. It's always a pleasure,
man.
man.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Aaron. We'll talk to you soon. Thank you.
All right, take care.
Bye-bye.
Bye.